right, so our next speaker, Samuel Jared Taylor, is the editor of American Renaissance, an online magazine that has been described as the leading intellectual journal of contemporary white nationalism. It's quite the accolade. His track record is an impressive one, and his achievements demand respect. Taylor has been accused of promoting racist ideologies by civil rights groups, journalists, and academics, but he maintains that he believes in biological race and its according consequences. He is a strong white advocate who can be relied upon to speak openly about race realism. He argues that his work is analogous to other groups that advocate for ethnic or racial interests. And this is a double standard that we in Britain are very familiar with. Only whites are attacked for being ethnocentric, while other races are actively encouraged to be that way. Mr. Taylor is no fool. He knows that any multiracial or multi-ethnic society is doomed to fail. Human beings are naturally tribal, and they always favor their own when the going gets tough. His honest assessment of these simple facts has earned him no end of slings and arrows from the left, but I think that he'll be right at home here among us. So please give him a huge round of applause. It's Jared Taylor.
Thank you very much. Well, it is a great pleasure and an honor to be here. And I stand here humbly saluting you. I think you can easily divide the human population roughly into two groups. There are the talkers, and then there are the doers. I've mostly been a talker, but here I am among doers, and I have the greatest admiration for those who do. People who organize communities, the active clubs, for example, or communities of people who build an environment where white children can be honored for who they are. I think this is one of the most important things we can now do, is have a place where families can grow up and their children can understand that it's not okay to be white. It's wonderful to be white. And so I very much appreciate all of this great work that all of you are doing. As a speaker and a talker, I salute you doers. I also stand before you as very much an American. It's hard to be more American than your servant. The first Taylor came to the colonies in 1635. And when that seed of Albion was planted, there were a great many Englishmen in that family tree. So I'm about as English as it is possible for an American to be, to have lived as long in North America as my family has. But we have voted in every election, fought in every war. At the time of our great Civil War, all of my male ancestors of military age fought for the Confederacy. And so that land is stuffed with our bones, drenched in our blood. And so I am American. At the same time, though, I am a proud son of England. I'd have told you my family tree is full of English names: Eagleton, Symington, Robertson, Hopper, Taylor, Tacey, Webb, Knight, all good English names. An occasional Dutchman, we have a Gildersleeve up there in one of the branches, an occasional French Huguenot, we have a Lanou as well, but mostly English blood in my veins, and I'm very proud of it. And I must say that although it's terrible that we have spent so many centuries slaughtering our fellow whites, I was quite some years ago, I was in Portsmouth, England, and I set foot on HMS Victory. That was, of course, the flagship at the Battle of Trafalgar, and I could feel tears start to my eyes when I thought of that last command of the fleet. England expects that every man will do his duty. At that time, I was an Englishman. I would have done my duty. At the same time, though, as long as we are not just Americans, not just Englishmen, not just British people, we are also part of what I call the great brotherhood of Europeans. We have something in common with all of our fellow whites wherever they are. And as I say, we have slaughtered each other for centuries. We must never, ever do this again. Our people. And it's because of this great brotherhood that I have much more in common spiritually, culturally, in every way with an Estonian, for example, whose language I cannot understand, than I have with people who hold an American passport but are not Europeans. We are in this together. We will sink and we will swim together. So we have comrades in Sweden, one of whom is here today. We have comrades all around the world. And wherever I go at a meeting like this, I feel as though I am with family. These are my family. You are my brothers and sisters. And we have such people all around the world. Now, I am something of an ancient mariner in this voyage to white racial consciousness. So I'll talk a little about the last 35 years. I did start American Renaissance in 1990. It's hard to believe that it's been that many years. And at that time, about the only group that was talking seriously about the challenges that we face was the Ku Klux Klan, which was just as marginal and as ineffective then as it is today. There were a few little publications. Notable among them was one called Instauration, but it was all very hush-hush. People never wrote under their own names. And I thought, well, we are obviously in a crisis. And what we say is so true and so obvious and so unimpeachably moral that if I just start saying these things rationally and gently and persuasively, well, pretty soon our ideas will be taken seriously. Well, I was a naive dope. It didn't happen quite that way. Now, I must say, though, that during the 1990s, there was a period of progress. I was often invited on radio and television, and there were some pretty good books that came out up until about the mid-1990s. And then, for reasons that I can't quite fathom, that may have to do with the rise of the internet that made it easier to find out what such organizations as the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Anti-Defamation League said about me, but it suddenly things just got clamped down in publishing and everything else. And I would say from about 2000 to 2016, it seemed to me that I was just making a record. And so that in the year 2100, when the editors of the great Chinese Encyclopedia of World History got the chapter on, well, what the heck happened to the white man? If there was some enterprising Chinaman who looked into the records, he might find that there were at least a few of us who weren't fools and cowards. But I thought that's about all I was doing. Then, in 2016, and a few years before that, there was the rise of what became called the alt-right, and the election of Donald Trump. That was a surprise triumph. Of course, Donald Trump piddled away his first 4 years. And in fact, it was at the very end of Donald Trump's 4 years. In fact, I can pick the very date. I can pinpoint the very date that I consider the nadir of the white man, certainly in the United States, and in many cases all around the world. That was May 25th of 2020. I think some of you know exactly what happened on that day. That's when George Floyd ascended into heaven. And it was from that point on that certainly the United States and much of the white world descended into a kind of collective madness that I never imagined. I had kept my fingers on the pulse of race relations in the United States all those years, but I could not believe the horror that one death unleashed. We've had many race riots in the United States, but always they had been restricted to the Negro quarter where the blacks would riot and burn down their own neighborhoods. Not this time. The rioting took place in some of the most high-priced commercial real estate in the entire country. In the Miracle Mile in Chicago, Rodeo Drive in Hollywood, Fifth Avenue in New York City, sacked and looted not just once in some cases, but several times. And something else that was different. It wasn't just blacks, many white people rioting. And the other thing that was brand new was this compulsion to tear down monuments. Not just monuments of my Confederate ancestors. This grieves me. It just wounds my heart to see these scum who are not worthy to black the boots of my ancestors, considering themselves their moral superiors, tearing down their monuments. If I ever get homicidal, that's when it is. But it wasn't just my ancestors. Ulysses S. Grant, who fought for the Yankees, Abraham Lincoln, Kit Carson. Kit Carson's probably not a name you know, but he was a white man. And on the campus of the University of Oregon, they had a statue to the pioneer mother. She had to come down. Why is that? Because she had white children. She was a pioneer. But in some respects, worst of all, was the 30 statues and memorials to Christopher Columbus that these rioters took down. Now, I can assure you, back in the race riots in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, we've had them continuously ever since the 1960s. No one would have thought that it was appropriate to tear down a statue of Christopher Columbus because black people got angry. And the fact that this was done, as I say, not just one time, but 30 times. What that tells you is that these were not just angry black riots. These were quite explicitly anti-white riots. For those who believe, as has once been said, that white people are the cancer of human history, well, I suppose Christopher Columbus was patient zero in bringing that cancer to the New World, so he had to go. This was unprecedented, and I was astonished. And I'll tell you something else that astonished me was one of the slogans that was common at the time that has nevertheless kind of disappeared from view, and that is, white silence is violence. Now, what on earth does this mean? That means that if white people are not bellowing about how Black Lives Matter and constantly apologizing at the tops of their lungs for all the evil we've done, somehow we're committing violence against non-whites. You can be sitting having a quiet cup of coffee, but you might as well be kicking a black man in the shins. And I suppose that's why my ancestors had to be taken down from their tall towers, because from the silence of the grave, they were committing violence. What utter insanity. And then there were the Biden years that pushed DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, this anti-white craziness into every conceivable part of the United States government, such that the job of NASA was to get us to the moon and perhaps to Mars, but also to make black people happy. The Federal Reserve, its job is to make sure that there's not too much inflation, full employment, and to make black people happy. Every part of the government had to make black people happy as part of its job. And of course, countless millions of illegals, 14 million, 16 million, who's counting? Just waved in, come one, come all, welcome, welcome. Stick your snouts in the public trough. We can't have too many illegal immigrants. And of course, the idea you can change your sex, and being fat is wonderful, and there's something wrong with men who like pretty women, and all of these misogynistic couples on television always, all the time. But since that time, there's been a remarkable bounce back. Some of the obvious signs were the election of Donald Trump a second time. I really didn't expect it to happen. But I think some of that was a reaction to those months of insanity brought on by the whole BLM craziness, absolute craziness. Donald Trump got elected. Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, bought Twitter. And all of a sudden, we had some real free speech. And not only did he buy Twitter, also he's retweeting some remarkably sensible things. People can't ignore him. And as part of this remarkable bouncing back of the white man who seemed absolutely on his knees, if not flat on his back, was the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Now, I didn't really pay that much attention to Charlie Kirk. I was aware that he'd started off as a more or less conventional conservative. When he first got in the business, he was selling T-shirts with Martin Luther King's effigy on it, almost honoring him as practically one of our founding fathers. But he moved more and more in our direction. He certainly was not one of us, but if he was not already great, he was certainly on the path to greatness, and it seemed to me the more frankly he spoke about our issues, the greater he became. And so I'm going to read to you a few quotations from Charlie Kirk, but as I read them, please bear in mind that he was a close friend of the Vice President, and at his memorial service, where more than 100,000 people were in attendance and included practically the top echelons of the United States government, this is the man all of these people were honoring, and this is the sort of thing that he said. Islam is the sword the left is using to slit the throat of America. He talked about the great replacement, which is well underway every single day at our southern border. America was at its peak when we halted immigration for 40 years and we dropped our foreign-born percentage to its lowest level ever. Remember, friend of the Vice President, President Trump speaking at his memorial service. In urban America, prowling blacks go around for fun to target white people. If I see a black pilot, I'm going to think, boy, I hope he's qualified. He called our universities islands of totalitarianism. I wish I'd thought of that. He called LGBTQ activists the alphabet mafia. He said the American Democrat Party loves it when America becomes less white. And also, to evoke the great Martin Luther King again, Charlie Kirk said he is admired only because he said one thing he didn't actually believe in. I wish I'd come up with that too. He also called the Civil Rights Act of 1964 a huge mistake. And now to put that in perspective, in the United States today, the Civil Rights Act of 64 that banned private racial discrimination, it's considered almost Holy Writ. It might as well have come down from Mount Sinai as the 11th commandment. And for Charlie Kirk to say that was a huge mistake and that it set up an enormous anti-white bureaucracy, that is about as close to heresy as it's possible to get. He also said Jewish groups have funded all the worst anti-white ideologies. Again, he was not entirely one of us. I'm not sure he ever pronounced the word remigration, but he was certainly coming our way. All my career, I've been grateful for the things people have been willing to say, and I have not reproached them for the things they are unwilling to say, and Charlie Kirk said many, many good things. And to put it perhaps excessively modestly, but I think accurately, he succeeded where I failed. He succeeded in just a few years what I have failed to do in 35 years, and that is to say, to inject some of these heretical views, but views that are necessary for our survival into the larger political discourse. At the time he died, he was speaking to an American campus audience, a university audience of 3,000 people. I'm rarely invited on college campus. I'm lucky if I can get 300 people. He was doing wonderful work. And of course, there are other things happening that fill me with great enthusiasm. Remigration is something at least being talked about practically throughout the white world. And I was at the Remigration Summit in Milan earlier this year, and it was so encouraging to see all of these earnest, committed white men and women talking about remigration as the absolute necessity for saving Europe. And I was so glad to see people all from different nations. I remember being thunderstruck in 2014 when I was in Hungary and talking to some of the Hungarian comrades. They couldn't decide, well, whom do we hate most? Is it Slovaks or Romanians? I remember saying, well, fellas, we've got more important fish we need to fry. But absolutely none of that at the Remigration Summit. Europeans all putting their shoulders to the same wheel. And this reminds me of the only good thing about getting old is to see all of the wonderful young white people who see this crisis so clearly, far more clearly than 99% of the people in my generation. When I first got started 35 years ago, I'd speak to a group like this, maybe 1/10 the size, and I'd look around the audience, and they were visible cranks. People, funny-looking people in ill-fitting clothes, the sorts of people you would never want to take home and introduce to your mother or to your girlfriend. No. Those people are gone. Where they went, I do not know, I do not care. But the people now, sharp, intelligent, well-dressed, got good jobs with families. The transformation has been absolutely remarkable. And sometimes young people say, well, you've been an inspiration to me. I tell them, you are an inspiration to me because it is you people who will make things happen. I feel as though my generation has left your generation a hell of a mess. But you will fix things, I feel sure. But there is one thing I believe that the talkers and the doers can agree on, and that is we have a common goal, and that is to reach and convince our wayward brothers and sisters, our fellow white people, and bring them our way. Unlike the people of any other race, it's hard to reach white people simply by appealing to their obvious direct interests. That works for everyone else, but not for us. Do you think black people give a hoot about taking what is obviously ours? No. Do you think the Chinese care if we smother our own economies in the goal of carbon neutrality while they pollute the planet? No, they'll just laugh at us. White people are different. Our nature is to be fair-minded. And so if we cannot appeal directly to the self-interest of whites, we have to appeal to them arguments about the double standards, the suicidal double standards under which we live. We must show whites that the basic survival that every single other race takes for granted is denied only to us. Something else that's very difficult is that we have to accept that some of these wayward brothers and sisters of ours, these white liberals, they act in goodwill. They mean well. You may disagree. You may think they're evil, but I'm right and you're wrong. The overwhelming majority of liberal whites, they truly believe they're on the side of the angels. They're doing their best to do what is right. They act as though they are not, but I believe that is truly what they believe. They're deluded, they're closed-minded, they're stubborn, and they're wrong. But they don't get up in the morning and say, what can I do today to bring white people down? I mean, sometimes their actions might suggest that. That's not what they think. And if we are to persuade them, we have to at least accept their sincerity, even if it's impossible to understand their motives. And so we must persuade them, because if we are to succeed, many more of them must join us. And for them to join us, we have to reach their hearts, not just appeal to their minds. Yes, we are in a fight for our very lives. This is like the Battle of Tours. It's like the Siege of Vienna. We are like the Boers at the Battle of Blood River. Their task was simple: kill the enemy or die trying. I wish our job were so simple, but it's not. I believe that every man in this room, perhaps every woman as well, would march smiling, laughing into his grave if he were convinced that by dying he could ensure the survival of our people. But our job is so much harder. And that is because among the opponents arrayed against us are so many of our own brothers and sisters. And as I say, I believe they are well-meaning, these white people. And that is the great tragedy of our struggle. And it makes it different from any other struggle in human history, because we are in the horrible position of having to persuade our own people that our descendants have a right to survive. No one else, I believe, has ever had such a horrible task before them. And so often, the people arrayed against us are, as many of you know, the members of our own immediate families. I believe that almost every white man and white woman has within him or her at least a tiny glow, a tiny spark of racial consciousness. And it's our job to find that spark, to blow on it patiently and lovingly, and turn it into a raging fire. But to persuade our brothers and sisters to join us, there's something that's just as important as our ideas, our logics, our appeal to history, our appeal to morality. And that is our nature, our appearance, our demeanor. This will persuade as much as our arguments. We are right, but we are in the remarkable position of having to be more than right. We want our fellow whites to think as we do, but for that to happen, they must also want to be as we are. And for that reason, we must be the best white men and women we can possibly be. That should always be our goal, but that is especially so in this time of terrible crisis for our race. We should always strive to set examples, to be models of honesty, honor, manliness, integrity, courage, virtue, and faithfulness. These are, after all, the traits of our people. And we must never forget that every one of us has the blood of heroes in his veins. We must strive to be those white men and women that our deluded brothers and sisters, even in their hypnotized state, in their bones, know are their destiny ultimately. And there are in this room such people who will break through the illusions and will win admiration, will win imitation, and bring them to our cause. I believe that we are in the greatest struggle in the history of the world. On us rides the fate of our people, the fate of the West, the fate of everything our ancestors fought for, and the fate of everything we love. I would give anything to be 35 years younger, to have 35 more years in the service of our people. I may not live to see the future of our race assured and fortified against every threat, but some of you will, I'm sure. But for now, it's my honor and privilege to stand shoulder to shoulder with all of you in this great cause to which we've dedicated our lives, and which those of you who are younger than I will lead us to victory. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.